Welcome, weary wanderer, to the peculiar corridors of Elmore Junior High, where the extraordinary masquerades as ordinary and the absurd becomes routine. Tonight, we delve into the intertwined destinies of two souls bound by the sacred halls of education, Principal Nigel Brown and Miss Lucy Simian. This is a tale of dedication and disappointment, of romance blooming in the most unexpected places, and of two individuals whose lives have become as inseparable as chalk and blackboard. So settle in, close your eyes, and let us explore the deeper mysteries that lie beneath the surface of their seemingly simple world. In the beginning, before the chaos of Elmore Junior High became the defining rhythm of his existence, Nigel Brown was a child who believed with absolute certainty that education could save the world. He was the sort of boy who arranged his pencils in perfect rows, who raised his hand for every question, and who stayed after class not because he was in trouble, but because he genuinely enjoyed the company of teachers and the sacred ritual of learning. His childhood was painted in the gentle colors of suburban normalcy, where tree-lined streets led to modest homes, and where the most exciting event of any given week was the arrival of the bookmobile at the local library. Young Nigel would be waiting at the curb when that magnificent vehicle rounded the corner, its shelves packed with adventures and knowledge that seemed to hold infinite possibility. The Brown household was one where education was revered above all other pursuits. His parents, both middle-class professionals who had worked their way up from humble beginnings, spoke of teachers with the same reverence that others reserved for saints or heroes. They understood, perhaps better than most, the transformative power that a dedicated educator could wield in the life of a young person. Nigel absorbed these lessons like a sponge drinking in water, his young mind shaping itself around the noble ideal that teaching was not merely a profession, but a calling of the highest order. He would spend hours in his bedroom, arranging his stuffed animals in neat rows and conducting elaborate lessons on subjects he had learned that very day at school. His teddy bear became his most attentive student, while his toy soldiers served as examples of discipline and order. When other children his age were dreaming of becoming astronauts or professional athletes, Nigel Brown was already planning his career in education, with the methodical precision that would later characterize his administrative style. He researched teaching colleges with the dedication of a scholar, comparing curricula and examining graduation rates, as if his very soul depended upon making the correct choice. His teenage years were marked by the same earnest dedication that had defined his childhood, though now tempered with the growing awareness that the world of education was far more complex than he had initially imagined. He volunteered as a tutor for younger students, served on the student council with unwavering commitment, and spent his summers working at educational camps where he could observe master teachers in action. The young man who entered college was brimming with theories and idealism, his head full of progressive educational philosophies and innovative teaching methods that he was certain would revolutionize the learning experience for his future students. He studied pedagogy with the fervor of a religious convert, absorbing every new concept and methodology as if they were sacred texts that held the keys to unlocking human potential. His early student teaching experiences only reinforced his belief in the transformative power of education. He witnessed firsthand the moment when a struggling student suddenly understood a difficult concept, saw the light of comprehension dawn in young eyes that had previously held only confusion and frustration. These moments felt like small miracles, confirmation that he had chosen not just a career but a sacred mission. When Nigel Brown finally stepped into his first classroom as a fully certified teacher, he carried with him all the hopes and dreams that had sustained him through years of preparation. The walls he decorated with colorful educational posters, the lesson plans he crafted with meticulous care, the welcome speech he had rehearsed dozens of times. All of these represented his absolute faith that he could make a meaningful difference in the lives of his students. Those first few years of teaching were intoxicating in their intensity and purpose. Every successful lesson felt like a victory. Every breakthrough moment with a difficult student seemed to validate his life choices. He stayed late into the evening, perfecting his teaching materials and devising new ways to engage reluctant learners. He attended every professional development workshop, read every educational journal, and participated in every committee that would have him. Yet, as the years accumulated like layers of chalk dust on his jacket, Nigel began to encounter the harsh realities that his idealistic education had never fully prepared him to face. Budget cuts that eliminated programs he had spent months developing. Administrative mandates that prioritized test scores over genuine learning. Parents who viewed him not as a professional educator, but as a glorified babysitter whose primary job was to keep their children occupied while they pursued their own careers. The bureaucracy of education proved to be a labyrinth of competing priorities and conflicting demands that seemed designed more to frustrate genuine learning than to facilitate it. Forms had to be filled out in triplicate. Lesson plans had to conform to rigid state standards that left little room for creativity or spontaneous teaching moments, and every educational decision had to be justified through statistical data rather than professional judgment. Still, Nigel persevered, finding ways to work within the system while maintaining his commitment to his students. He learned to navigate the political complexities of school administration, to present his innovative ideas in language that administrators could understand and approve. He discovered that sometimes the most radical thing a teacher could do was simply to care deeply about the individual needs of each student. The transition from classroom teacher to school administrator was not one that Nigel had originally planned, but rather something that evolved naturally from his desire to create positive change on a larger scale. He had grown frustrated with the limitations imposed by working within a single classroom, feeling that his impact, however meaningful to his individual students, was ultimately constrained by forces beyond his control. The opportunity to become an assistant principal presented itself at a time when Nigel was beginning to question whether he could continue to thrive as a classroom teacher within an increasingly restrictive educational environment. The promise of being able to influence school-wide policies, to create systemic changes that would benefit not just his own students but entire generations of learners, proved too compelling to resist. His early years in administration were marked by the same earnest dedication that had characterized his teaching career, though now channeled into the complexities of budget management, personnel decisions, and the delicate art of managing competing constituencies. He discovered that being an effective administrator required not just educational expertise, but also the diplomatic skills of a seasoned politician and the patience of a saint. The weight of responsibility that came with administrative leadership was something that Nigel had not fully anticipated. Every decision he made had the potential to impact hundreds of students, dozens of teachers, and countless families within the school community. The luxury of focusing solely on the needs of his own classroom was replaced by the necessity of balancing competing demands and limited resources across an entire institution. Yet, even as the challenges mounted and the paperwork threatened to bury his original passion for education, Nigel never lost sight of the fundamental mission that had drawn him to this profession in the first place. He still believed, perhaps with slightly less naive optimism but with deeper understanding, that education could change lives, and that schools could be places where young minds were nurtured and challenged to reach their full potential. The position of principal at Elmore Junior High represented the culmination of everything Nigel Brown had been working toward throughout his career in education. Here was the opportunity to lead an entire school community, to implement the vision of educational excellence that had sustained him through years of classroom teaching and administrative apprenticeship. His appointment to this role came at a time when the school was struggling with declining test scores, budget constraints, and the general malaise that seemed to plague many public educational institutions. The district superintendents who hired him spoke of the need for strong leadership, innovative thinking, and the ability to inspire both faculty and students to achieve their highest potential. Principal Brown approached his new position with the same methodical preparation that had characterized every major transition in his professional life. He spent weeks studying the school's history, analyzing demographic data, and reviewing the personnel files of the faculty members who would now be under his supervision. He crafted vision statements and mission goals, developed strategic plans for academic improvement, and prepared himself to become the educational leader he had always dreamed of being. What he could not have anticipated was how profoundly his life would be changed, not by the administrative challenges or the educational innovations he would implement, but by a single encounter with a faculty member whose perspective on education and life itself would challenge every assumption he had developed over his years in the profession. The corridors of Elmore Junior High would become more than just the setting for his professional achievements. They would become the backdrop for a personal transformation that would teach him lessons no education course had ever covered, about the complexities of human connection and the unexpected ways that two very different souls can find common ground in the shared mission of nurturing young minds. Meanwhile, in dimensions of time and experience that stretched far beyond the comprehension of any mortal educator, Lucy Simian had been teaching for so long that the very concept of a beginning to her career had faded into the mists of prehistoric memory. She had stood before countless generations of students, watching civilizations rise and fall, while the fundamental challenge of imparting knowledge to reluctant young minds remained frustratingly constant across the millennia. Her earliest memories of teaching were set against backdrops that would seem mythical to modern eyes: caves where firelight flickered against stone walls covered with the first crude attempts at written language, primitive settlements where the distinction between teacher and shaman was non-existent, ancient civilizations where education was the privilege of the wealthy few, while the masses remained trapped in ignorance. Through the rise of the Egyptian dynasties, she had taught the children of pharaohs and scribes, watching as hieroglyphics evolved into more sophisticated forms of communication, while human nature remained stubbornly unchanged. Young princes who would one day rule empires displayed the same tendency toward distraction and mischief that would later characterize students in 21st century classrooms. The classical period brought new challenges and opportunities as Greek and Roman civilizations developed the first formal educational institutions. Lucy found herself adapting to structured curricula, standardized teaching methods, and the novel concept that education could be systematically organized rather than passed down through informal apprenticeships and oral traditions. Medieval times presented their own unique set of obstacles, as education became increasingly intertwined with religious doctrine and political power. She learned to navigate the complexities of teaching within monastic schools and cathedral chapters, where knowledge was carefully controlled and dissenting ideas could have dangerous consequences for both teacher and student. The Renaissance brought excitement and frustration in equal measure, as the explosion of new learning and scientific discovery created unprecedented opportunities for intellectual growth, while also challenging established educational orthodoxies. Lucy watched with mixed emotions as the printing press revolutionized the distribution of knowledge, making books available to ordinary people for the first time, while also threatening the traditional authority of teachers as the primary gatekeepers of information. The Industrial Revolution transformed education once again, as the needs of an increasingly mechanized society demanded new forms of literacy and technical knowledge. Lucy adapted her teaching methods to accommodate larger classes, more structured schedules, and the growing expectation that schools should prepare students for specific economic roles rather than simply cultivating their intellectual capacities. The 20th century brought perhaps the most rapid and dramatic changes she had witnessed in all her millennia of teaching experience. 2 world wars disrupted traditional educational patterns, while technological advances created entirely new fields of knowledge that had to be integrated into already overcrowded curricula. The development of child psychology and educational theory provided new insights into how young minds learned, though Lucy often found these revolutionary discoveries to be variations on patterns she had observed countless times before. Through all these epochs and transformations, certain fundamental truths about teaching and learning had remained constant in ways that both comforted and frustrated the immortal educator. Children were still children, regardless of the historical context in which they lived. They still craved attention and approval, still tested boundaries and challenged authority, still responded to patience and kindness while rebelling against harsh treatment and arbitrary rules. The techniques that worked in ancient Mesopotamia, establishing clear expectations, maintaining consistent discipline, finding ways to make learning relevant to students' lives, proved just as effective in modern American public schools. The specific content might change as human knowledge expanded and evolved, but the fundamental challenge of inspiring young minds to embrace learning remained essentially the same across all cultures and time periods. This recognition had gradually transformed Lucy's approach to education from one of naive optimism to something approaching philosophical resignation. She had seen too many educational reforms come and go, too many miracle curricula that promised to revolutionize learning only to be abandoned when they failed to produce immediate results. The cycles of innovation and retrenchment had become as predictable to her as the changing of the seasons. Her teaching methods had crystallized over the centuries into a rigid system that prioritized order, discipline, and measurable outcomes over the messy uncertainties of creative exploration and individual expression. She had learned through bitter experience that flexibility and innovation, while intellectually appealing, often led to chaos and disappointment when applied to the realities of classroom management. The development of her stern, no-nonsense pedagogical style was not born from cruelty or indifference to her students' needs, but rather from a deep understanding of how quickly educational environments could deteriorate when clear boundaries were not established and maintained. She had witnessed the consequences of permissive teaching approaches too many times to trust in anything other than structured, traditional methods. Her reputation among students and faculty as a demanding, inflexible educator was something she had cultivated deliberately, understanding that respect born from fear was often more effective than affection that could be withdrawn when students faced genuinely challenging material or difficult life circumstances. The armor of strict professionalism protected both her and her students from the emotional vulnerabilities that could undermine the essential teaching-learning relationship. Yet beneath this carefully constructed facade of educational authority lay depths of loneliness and isolation that few could comprehend. The blessing and curse of immortality meant that Lucy had outlived every colleague, every friendship, every professional relationship she had ever developed. The pain of watching beloved students grow old and die while she remained unchanged had taught her to maintain emotional distance as a matter of psychological survival. Her vast experience, while invaluable in terms of educational expertise, also served to isolate her from the normal rhythms of human professional development. While other teachers grew and evolved through collaboration with peers, attending conferences, and learning from mentors, Lucy found herself perpetually on the outside of professional communities that were designed around the assumption of finite career spans and shared generational experiences. The arrival of yet another new principal at Elmore Junior High was something Lucy viewed with the weary skepticism that comes from having observed dozens of administrative changes over the years. In her experience, educational leaders fell into predictable categories: the ambitious climbers who viewed schools as stepping stones to district-level positions, the burned-out former teachers who had fled classroom pressures only to discover that administrative responsibilities were equally stressful, and the idealistic reformers who arrived with grand visions that inevitably collided with the harsh realities of public education. Principal Nigel Brown's initial presentation to the faculty suggested that he belonged to the latter category, which Lucy found both predictable and mildly irritating. His earnest enthusiasm, his carefully prepared vision statements, and his obvious belief that he could somehow transform their struggling institution through sheer force of will struck her as painfully naive, given her centuries of experience with similar administrative promises. The professional development workshops he organized, the new initiatives he proposed, and the collaborative teaching methods he advocated all seemed like variations on themes Lucy had encountered countless times before. She had learned to nod politely during faculty meetings, while internally calculating how long it would take for this particular wave of reform enthusiasm to crash against the immovable obstacles of limited resources, resistant students, and bureaucratic inertia. Yet, something about Principal Brown's approach began to intrigue her in ways she had not expected. Unlike many administrators who seemed more interested in impressing their supervisors than supporting their faculty, he displayed a genuine curiosity about the day-to-day challenges faced by classroom teachers. His questions during faculty meetings were thoughtful rather than perfunctory, suggesting that he was actually listening to the responses rather than simply waiting for his turn to present the next agenda item. More surprisingly, he seemed to recognize and respect the expertise that Lucy's long experience had given her, often seeking her input on student discipline issues and curriculum questions that other administrators might have handled unilaterally. This acknowledgement of her professional knowledge was something she had rarely experienced from educational leaders who were often intimidated by faculty members whose teaching experience exceeded their own. The gradual development of professional respect between Principal Brown and Miss Simian occurred so slowly and subtly that neither of them fully recognized it until it had already become an established pattern in their working relationship. What began as grudging acknowledgement of each other's competence evolved into something approaching genuine collaboration, as they discovered that their very different perspectives on education could complement rather than conflict with each other. Brown's optimistic vision of what schools could become began to be tempered by Simian's realistic understanding of what schools actually were, while her cynical worldview was slowly softened by his persistent belief that individual students could still be reached and inspired despite systemic failures and institutional limitations. Their conversations, initially formal exchanges of professional courtesy, gradually deepened into genuine discussions about the nature of education and the challenges facing public schools in the modern era. This meeting of minds between two educators separated by vast differences in experience and outlook would prove to be the foundation for something neither of them had expected to find in the hallways of Elmore Junior High, a connection that would transcend the professional realm and venture into territories of trust, understanding, and ultimately love that would transform both of their lives in ways that no amount of educational training could have prepared them for. The morning that Principal Nigel Brown first walked through the doors of Elmore Junior High as its newly appointed leader, he carried with him not only the weight of administrative responsibility, but also the carefully cultivated hope that this institution might finally provide the canvas upon which he could paint his vision of educational excellence. The building itself seemed to whisper stories of decades past, its corridors echoing with the accumulated memories of countless students and teachers who had passed through these halls in pursuit of knowledge, growth, and the elusive promise of a better future. His first faculty meeting was scheduled for 7:30 in the morning, a time chosen deliberately to demonstrate his commitment to maximizing instructional time while also accommodating the complex schedules that defined modern educational life. As he arranged his materials in the school's modest conference room, checking and rechecking his presentation notes with the nervous energy of someone who understood that first impressions could set the tone for years of professional relationships, Principal Brown reminded himself of all the research he had conducted about effective leadership transitions. The faculty members who began filtering into the room represented a cross-section of educational experience and professional philosophy that immediately caught his attention. There were young teachers whose enthusiasm practically radiated from their carefully chosen professional attire and meticulously organized planning binders, veteran educators whose comfortable confidence suggested decades of classroom expertise, and a few individuals whose expressions of polite skepticism indicated that they had witnessed more than their share of administrative changes and reform initiatives. Yet it was the figure who entered last, settling into a chair at the back of the room with the deliberate precision of someone who had attended countless similar meetings, that captured Principal Brown's particular interest. Miss Lucy Simian possessed a presence that seemed to transcend the ordinary boundaries of professional authority, her posture and bearing suggesting depths of experience that extended far beyond what any personnel file could adequately document. Her appearance was both timeless and anachronistic, as if she had stepped from an earlier era of education when teachers commanded automatic respect and classrooms operated according to principles that had been tested and refined over generations of practice. The way other faculty members unconsciously deferred to her presence, the subtle nods of acknowledgement she received from colleagues who clearly valued her opinion, and the air of unshakable competence that surrounded her like an invisible cloak, all indicated that Miss Simian occupied a unique position within the school's social and professional hierarchy. Principal Brown's opening remarks were crafted to strike a balance between acknowledging the school's current challenges and expressing optimism about its future potential. He spoke of data-driven instruction and collaborative learning communities, of student-centered pedagogy and differentiated assessment strategies, using the educational jargon that had become the lingua franca of modern school administration, while trying to infuse these familiar concepts with genuine passion and purpose. Throughout his presentation, he found his attention repeatedly drawn to Miss Simian's reactions, noting the subtle shifts in her expression that seemed to indicate either approval or skepticism regarding his various proposals. Unlike some faculty members who nodded enthusiastically at everything he said, or others who maintained carefully neutral expressions that revealed nothing about their true opinions, she appeared to be genuinely evaluating each idea on its merits, her responses suggesting a depth of professional knowledge that could prove either invaluable or challenging depending on how their working relationship developed. When the formal presentation concluded, and Principal Brown opened the floor for questions and discussion, the initial responses followed predictable patterns. Newer teachers asked about resources and support systems. Veteran educators inquired about policy changes and administrative expectations, and department heads raised concerns about scheduling conflicts and curriculum alignment issues. Yet when Miss Simian finally spoke, her question cut through the surface-level concerns to address fundamental assumptions about educational philosophy that Principal Brown had not expected to encounter in his first faculty meeting. Her inquiry was deceptively simple, phrased with the kind of directness that comes from decades of experience. cutting through administrative rhetoric to reach substantive issues. She wanted to know not what programs he planned to implement or what initiatives he hoped to launch, but rather what he understood about the essential nature of teaching and learning in an environment where students arrived each day carrying the complex baggage of their individual lives, family circumstances, and previous educational experiences. The question forced Principal Brown to move beyond his prepared talking points and engage with the deeper philosophical foundations that underpinned his approach to educational leadership. As he formulated his response, he became aware that this was not merely a faculty member seeking clarification about administrative policies, but rather a seasoned professional, challenging him to demonstrate the depth of his understanding about the fundamental challenges facing public education in the modern era. His answer revealed both the strength and limitations of his perspective, acknowledging the idealistic vision that had originally drawn him to education, while also recognizing the practical constraints that shaped daily classroom reality. He spoke of his belief that every student possessed untapped potential that could be unlocked through appropriate instruction and support, but also admitted his growing understanding that realizing this potential required more than good intentions and innovative teaching methods. Miss Simian's response to his explanation was measured and thoughtful, neither dismissive of his optimism nor entirely supportive of his approach. She acknowledged the value of maintaining high expectations, while also noting the importance of understanding how those expectations needed to be calibrated to account for the diverse needs and circumstances of individual students. Her comments suggested a perspective informed by extensive experience with the gap between educational theory and classroom practice. This initial exchange established a pattern that would characterize their professional relationship throughout Principal Brown's first months at Elmore Junior High. Rather than the automatic deference he had sometimes encountered from faculty members who were either intimidated by administrative authority or cynical about the possibility of meaningful change, Miss Simian offered something far more valuable: honest, informed feedback that challenged him to refine his ideas, while also providing practical insights about implementation strategies. Their first individual meeting occurred 3 weeks into the school year, when a complex disciplinary situation involving multiple students required the kind of collaborative problem-solving that had become increasingly rare in educational environments where administrative decisions were often made unilaterally. The incident itself was typical of the challenges that defined daily life at Elmore Junior High: a combination of student misbehavior, parental concerns, and policy conflicts that required careful navigation to avoid escalation into a more serious confrontation. Miss Simian's approach to the situation demonstrated the kind of nuanced understanding that comes from having encountered similar problems countless times before. Rather than advocating for either purely punitive or entirely permissive responses, she outlined a strategy that acknowledged the legitimate concerns of all parties, while also establishing clear consequences for inappropriate behavior. Her analysis of the underlying factors that had contributed to the incident revealed a sophisticated understanding of adolescent psychology and group dynamics that impressed Principal Brown with its practical wisdom. As they worked together to develop a response plan, Principal Brown found himself genuinely curious about the experiences that had shaped Miss Simian's perspective on education and student behavior. Her insights seemed to draw from a well of knowledge that extended far beyond typical professional development training or graduate coursework, suggesting exposure to educational challenges and solutions that spanned multiple contexts and time periods. The collaborative process of addressing this disciplinary situation created the first genuine moment of professional connection between them, as they discovered that their different approaches to problem-solving could complement rather than conflict with each other. Principal Brown's systematic analysis of policy implications and procedural requirements provided a necessary framework for action, while Miss Simian's intuitive understanding of student motivations and family dynamics offered crucial insights about likely outcomes and potential complications. Their success in resolving this initial challenge led to increased collaboration on subsequent issues, as both administrators and teachers began to recognize the effectiveness of their combined approach to complex problems. Parents who arrived for conferences prepared for confrontation found themselves instead engaged in productive conversations about their children's needs and appropriate support strategies. Students who expected either harsh punishment or meaningless consequences discovered that the adults in charge had developed responses that were both fair and meaningful. The gradual development of mutual professional respect between Principal Brown and Miss Simian occurred alongside their growing awareness of each other's individual strengths and perspectives. He began to appreciate not only her extensive knowledge about effective teaching practices, but also her ability to remain calm and focused under pressure, her skill at reading subtle social dynamics within the school community, and her unwavering commitment to maintaining high standards for both student behavior and academic achievement. For her part, Miss Simian found herself surprised by Principal Brown's willingness to listen to faculty input and modify his ideas based on practical feedback from classroom teachers. Unlike many administrators who seemed more interested in implementing predetermined initiatives than addressing actual school needs, he demonstrated genuine flexibility and openness to alternative approaches when presented with compelling arguments about their potential effectiveness. Their weekly administrative meetings evolved from formal exchanges of information about school operations into substantive discussions about educational philosophy, student needs, and institutional improvement strategies. These conversations often extended well beyond their scheduled time, as both participants found themselves engaged by ideas and perspectives they had not previously considered in depth. Principal Brown discovered that Miss Simian's apparent resistance to change was not rooted in stubbornness or fear of innovation, but rather in a deep understanding of how educational reforms often failed to account for the complex realities of classroom instruction and student behavior management. Her questions about new initiatives were not attempts to obstruct progress, but rather efforts to ensure that proposed changes would actually benefit students rather than simply creating additional work for teachers without corresponding improvements in learning outcomes. Miss Simian, meanwhile, began to recognize that Principal Brown's enthusiasm for educational innovation was grounded in genuine concern for student welfare rather than personal ambition or administrative convenience. His willingness to acknowledge when his ideas needed refinement, his openness to input from experienced faculty members, and his evident commitment to supporting teachers in their professional growth suggested a level of integrity and dedication that she had rarely encountered in educational leaders. The transformation of their professional relationship from polite collegiality to genuine collaboration became apparent to other faculty members who observed the increasing effectiveness of their combined leadership approach. Difficult situations that might have escalated into major confrontations were resolved through careful negotiation and creative problem-solving. New initiatives were introduced with appropriate preparation and support, rather than being imposed without adequate consultation or resources. Students, too, began to notice the difference in how disciplinary issues were handled and academic expectations were communicated. The consistency and fairness that characterized their joint approach to school administration created an environment where clear boundaries were maintained without resorting to arbitrary authority or inflexible rule enforcement. The message that both caring and accountability could coexist became a defining characteristic of the school culture they were building together. Yet, even as their professional partnership flourished, both Principal Brown and Miss Simian remained largely unaware of the personal dimensions of their growing connection. The respect and trust they had developed through their collaborative work created a foundation of mutual understanding that would soon extend beyond purely professional considerations, though neither of them yet recognized the deeper currents of attraction and affinity that were beginning to flow beneath the surface of their administrative partnership. The late October faculty meeting that marked the end of the first quarter provided an opportunity for both of them to reflect on how their working relationship had evolved since those tentative initial encounters in early September. As Principal Brown reviewed the improved test scores, reduced disciplinary referrals, and increased teacher satisfaction that characterized the school's progress during his first months as leader, he found himself attributing much of this success to the wisdom and support he had received from his most experienced faculty member, Miss Simian. Observing the genuine enthusiasm with which other teachers now participated in faculty discussions and the increased willingness of students to engage with academic challenges, acknowledged to herself that Principal Brown's leadership approach had created positive changes that extended far beyond what she had initially thought possible. The combination of his visionary thinking and her practical experience had produced results that neither of them could have achieved independently. As they concluded their first quarter of collaborative leadership at Elmore Junior High, both Principal Brown and Miss Simian had begun to recognize that their professional partnership represented something unusual and valuable in the often fractious world of public education. They had found in each other not only competent colleagues, but also intellectual companions whose different perspectives enriched their understanding of the complex challenges and opportunities that defined their shared mission of serving students and supporting teachers in the pursuit of educational excellence. The foundation they had built through months of careful collaboration would soon support the next phase of their relationship. As professional respect gradually evolved into personal affection, and the boundaries between their working partnership and their individual lives began to blur in ways that would surprise them both with their intensity and significance. Yet for now, as autumn settled over Elmore Junior High and the rhythms of the academic year established themselves in the familiar patterns of lessons and learning, assessments and achievements, they remained focused on the immediate satisfactions of work well done and challenges successfully met through the power of genuine collaboration and mutual respect. The transformation from professional respect to personal curiosity began with the smallest of observations, moments so subtle that neither Principal Brown nor Miss Simian initially recognized them as harbingers of deeper change. It was the way she paused slightly before responding to his questions during their weekly meetings, as if she were considering not just the administrative implications of her answers, but also how her words might affect him personally. It was the manner in which he found himself lingering in conversations that could have been concluded with simple yes or no responses, drawn by an inexplicable desire to understand the thoughts and experiences that shaped her unique perspective on education and life itself. The first genuine glimpse behind Miss Simian's carefully constructed professional facade occurred during a particularly challenging November afternoon, when a series of minor crises had accumulated into the kind of stressful day that tested even the most experienced educator's patience and resolve. The heating system had malfunctioned, leaving half the building uncomfortably cold while the other half sweltered in oppressive warmth. A substitute teacher had failed to arrive, forcing last-minute schedule adjustments that rippled through the entire academic program. 3 separate parent complaints had arrived via email, each demanding immediate attention and threatening to escalate to the district level if their concerns were not addressed with appropriate urgency and sensitivity. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when the last bus had departed and the corridors had finally quieted after a day of barely controlled chaos, Principal Brown found himself slouched in his office chair, staring at the stack of paperwork that seemed to have multiplied during the hours when his attention had been focused on crisis management rather than administrative routine. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with the kind of persistent background noise that becomes noticeable only in moments of relative quiet, while the late autumn sun slanted through his office windows at angles that suggested the approach of winter and the accompanying challenges of heating bills, seasonal illnesses, and the general malaise that often afflicted educational communities during the darker months of the year. A gentle knock on his door interrupted his contemplation of the day's accumulated frustrations, and he looked up to find Miss Simian standing in his doorway with 2 steaming cups of coffee balanced carefully in her hands. The gesture was so unexpected, so quietly thoughtful, that for a moment he simply stared at her in surprise, wondering when she had taken the time during such a hectic day to prepare this small offering of comfort and solidarity. She entered his office without waiting for an invitation, setting 1 cup on his desk before settling into the chair across from him with movements that suggested a degree of familiarity and comfort that had developed gradually over their months of collaboration. The coffee was prepared exactly as he preferred it, a detail that spoke of careful observation rather than lucky guesswork, and the warmth of the ceramic mug in his hands provided a physical comfort that somehow extended to the emotional tensions that had been building throughout the day. For several minutes, they sat in companionable silence, sipping their coffee while the stress of the day slowly began to dissipate in the quiet sanctuary of his office. The late afternoon light continued to fade outside his windows, painting the familiar landscape of parking lots and playing fields in the golden tones that made even the most mundane suburban scenery seem touched with beauty and significance. It was Miss Simian who finally broke the silence, her voice carrying a gentleness that he had rarely heard during their professional interactions. She spoke not about administrative matters or student concerns, but about the simple human reality of exhaustion and frustration that every educator experienced but few acknowledged openly. Her words carried the weight of extensive experience with difficult days, challenging students, and the accumulated stress that came from caring deeply about work that often seemed to generate more problems than solutions. As she talked, Principal Brown found himself seeing her not as the stern, unflappable professional he had come to know through their administrative partnership, but as someone who had weathered countless storms similar to the one they had just experienced. Her observations about the cyclical nature of educational challenges, the predictable patterns of crisis and resolution that characterize school life, and the importance of maintaining perspective during particularly overwhelming periods, revealed depths of wisdom that extended far beyond typical professional expertise. More significantly, her willingness to share these reflections in the quiet intimacy of his office after hours suggested a level of personal trust and connection that transcended their formal working relationship. She was offering him not just practical advice about managing stress and maintaining professional effectiveness, but also the gift of her authentic self, the person behind the professional mask, who understood the loneliness and burden that came with educational leadership. In response to her unexpected openness, Principal Brown found himself sharing his own struggles with the weight of administrative responsibility, the constant pressure to balance competing demands and limited resources, and the persistent fear that despite his best efforts and intentions, he might not be making the kind of positive difference in students' lives that had originally inspired his career in education. These admissions surprised him, even as he spoke them, as he had not previously allowed himself to articulate doubts that seemed to undermine the confident leadership image he worked so hard to maintain. Miss Simian listened without judgment or interruption, her attention focused entirely on his words rather than formulating responses or solutions. This quality of listening, he realized, was something he had rarely experienced in his professional life, where conversations were often hurried exchanges of information rather than genuine opportunities for reflection and understanding. When he finished speaking, she offered not platitudes about the importance of his work or reassurances about his competence as an administrator, but rather a perspective informed by her vast experience with the ebb and flow of educational challenges across different eras and contexts. She spoke of how the fundamental satisfactions of teaching, the moment when a struggling student finally grasps a difficult concept, the gradual development of critical thinking skills in young minds, the quiet pride of watching former students succeed in their chosen paths remained constant, even when the external pressures and institutional demands seemed overwhelming. Her words carried the authority of someone who had witnessed countless educational reforms, administrative changes, and crisis cycles, yet had somehow maintained her essential commitment to the core mission of nurturing learning and growth in young people. She helped him understand that the frustrations he was experiencing were not unique to his leadership or his school, but rather inherent aspects of working within systems designed by committees and constrained by politics, rather than shaped by educational wisdom and practical experience. As their conversation continued into the early evening hours, Principal Brown became aware that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. The professional boundaries that had previously defined their interactions remained intact, but they were now supplemented by a personal connection that added new dimensions of understanding and empathy to their collaborative work. He found himself genuinely curious about the experiences that had shaped Miss Simian's perspective on education and life, though he sensed that direct questions about her background might intrude upon privacy she was not yet ready to share. Instead, he listened carefully to the hints and references embedded in her observations, piecing together fragments of a personal history that seemed to span far more years and diverse experiences than her apparent age would suggest. The evening concluded with both of them acknowledging, without explicitly stating, that their conversation had moved beyond the typical boundaries of professional collegiality into territory that was more personal and intimate. As Miss Simian gathered her belongings to leave, she paused at his office door to make a comment about looking forward to tomorrow's challenges with renewed perspective, her words carrying implications about their partnership that extended beyond purely administrative considerations. This moment of personal connection opened a door that neither of them had consciously sought, but both found themselves eager to explore. In the days and weeks that followed, their professional interactions began to be supplemented by increasingly personal conversations that revealed the individual human beings behind their carefully maintained professional personas. Principal Brown discovered that Miss Simian possessed not only extensive knowledge about educational theory and practice, but also a breadth of cultural knowledge and life experience that seemed almost impossibly vast for someone of her apparent age. She could discuss literature from multiple historical periods with the insight of someone who had lived through their original publication, analyze social trends with the perspective of someone who had observed their cyclical patterns across generations, and offer practical wisdom about human nature that seemed grounded in observation rather than abstract study. Her references to historical events often carried a specificity and emotional resonance that suggested personal familiarity rather than academic knowledge, though she was careful never to make claims about experiences that would seem impossible or unbelievable. When she spoke about educational practices from earlier eras, her descriptions contained details about classroom atmospheres, student behaviors, and teaching challenges that could only come from direct observation and participation. These glimpses into the depths of her knowledge and experience created a sense of mystery that Principal Brown found increasingly compelling. Rather than feeling intimidated by the vast scope of her wisdom, he discovered that her willingness to share these insights with him suggested a level of trust and connection that made him feel privileged to be granted access to such carefully guarded personal territory. Miss Simian, for her part, found herself surprised by Principal Brown's genuine interest in her perspectives and experiences. Unlike many administrators who sought her input only when they needed help solving problems or managing difficult situations, he seemed genuinely curious about her thoughts on broader questions of educational philosophy, human nature, and the meaning of their shared work in the lives of young people. His questions were thoughtful and specific, demonstrating that he was actually listening to her responses, rather than simply waiting for his turn to speak. When she offered observations about the cyclical nature of educational challenges, or the consistent patterns of human behavior across different historical contexts, he engaged with these ideas as conversation partners, rather than dismissing them as the rambling reminiscences of an older colleague. More significantly, she began to recognize that his openness about his own struggles and uncertainties created a safe space for her to share aspects of her experience that she had kept hidden for decades. The loneliness that came from possessing knowledge and memories that extended far beyond normal human experience, the exhaustion that resulted from watching the same mistakes repeated across generations of students and colleagues, the sense of isolation that accompanied her unique position as someone who remembered when current innovations were previously attempted with similar promises and disappointing results. All of these burdens became more bearable when shared with someone who listened with genuine understanding and empathy. Their growing personal connection began to manifest in small gestures and considerations that went beyond the requirements of professional collaboration. Principal Brown started bringing an extra cup of coffee to their morning meetings, prepared according to preferences he had observed during their after-hours conversations. Miss Simian began staying late on particularly stressful days, offering her presence and perspective when the accumulated pressures of administrative leadership threatened to overwhelm his usually optimistic disposition. These moments of personal care and attention occurred within the context of their continued professional partnership, but they carried emotional weight that both participants recognized as significant, even when they chose not to acknowledge it explicitly. The boundary between collegial support and personal affection became increasingly blurred as they discovered how much comfort and strength they derived from each other's presence during challenging periods. The first explicit acknowledgement that their relationship had evolved beyond purely professional considerations occurred during the week before winter break, when the combination of holiday stress, semester assessments, and the general fatigue that accumulated during the darkest months of the academic year created an atmosphere of barely controlled chaos throughout the school. Students were restless with anticipation of vacation time. Teachers were exhausted from months of intensive instruction, and parents were adding pressure through increased demands for conferences and progress updates. Principal Brown had been working late every evening that week, staying in his office until well past 7 o'clock as he attempted to complete the administrative tasks that seemed to multiply faster than he could address them. The building was quiet and empty, except for the occasional sounds of custodial staff going about their evening routines, and the fluorescent lights in his office created a harsh contrast to the winter darkness visible through his windows. It was during one of these solitary evening sessions that Miss Simian appeared once again at his office door, though this time she carried not just coffee, but also a plate of homemade cookies and a thermos that suggested she had planned for an extended conversation rather than a brief check-in. The gesture was so thoughtful, so clearly intended to provide comfort and companionship during a stressful period, that Principal Brown felt an unexpected surge of emotion at the recognition that someone cared enough about his well-being to make such an effort on his behalf. As they settled into what had become their familiar pattern of after-hours conversation, The topics they discussed gradually shifted from professional concerns to more personal reflections about their individual experiences with the holiday season, their thoughts about the meaning of their work in the broader context of their lives, and their hopes and concerns about the future of their school and their partnership in leading it. It was during this conversation that Miss Simian made her first direct reference to the loneliness that had characterized much of her personal life, speaking with carefully controlled emotion about the challenges of maintaining meaningful relationships when one's professional commitments demanded so much time and energy. Her words carried implications about isolation and unfulfilled longing that resonated deeply with Principal Brown's own experiences of prioritizing career advancement over personal connections. In response to her unexpected vulnerability, he found himself sharing his own struggles with balancing professional success and personal fulfillment, acknowledging that his dedication to educational leadership had often come at the expense of the kind of intimate relationships that gave life meaning beyond professional achievement. These admissions created a moment of mutual recognition that their shared commitment to education had resulted in similar patterns of personal sacrifice and emotional isolation. The conversation continued well into the evening, moving gradually from abstract discussions about work-life balance to more specific revelations about their individual hopes, fears, and dreams for the future. For the first time since they had begun working together, they spoke not as principal and senior faculty member, but as Nigel and Lucy, two human beings who had found in each other a rare combination of professional respect, intellectual compatibility, and personal understanding. As the evening concluded, and they prepared to leave the building together, walking through the empty corridors that had witnessed so many of their professional collaborations, both of them were aware that something fundamental had changed in their relationship. The personal connection they had discovered during their hours of quiet conversation would inevitably affect their working partnership, though neither could yet predict exactly how this evolution would unfold. The drive home through the quiet suburban streets that night provided each of them with time to reflect on the unexpected directions their relationship had taken and the implications of the deeper connection they had acknowledged. For Principal Brown, the recognition that he had developed genuine feelings of affection and attraction for his most trusted colleague created both excitement and anxiety about how to navigate this new emotional territory while maintaining their effective professional partnership. For Miss Simian, the realization that she had found someone who seemed capable of understanding and accepting the complexities of her unique perspective on life and education brought both hope and apprehension about allowing herself to be vulnerable in ways she had avoided for longer than Principal Brown could possibly imagine. The prospect of opening her heart to someone who might eventually leave, grow old, or simply lose interest in her complicated personal history created fears that warred with her growing desire for genuine companionship and understanding. As winter break began, and they temporarily separated to spend time with their respective families and personal obligations, both Principal Brown and Miss Simian carried with them the memory of their evening conversation and the awareness that when they returned to school in January, they would need to address the personal feelings that had emerged alongside their professional partnership. The foundation had been laid for a romance that would transform both of their lives in ways they could not yet fully comprehend, built upon months of mutual respect, shared challenges, and the gradual recognition that they had found in each other not just excellent colleagues but also kindred spirits whose different life experiences created the potential for a relationship that could enrich and sustain them both through whatever challenges lay ahead. The return from winter break brought with it the crystalline clarity of January mornings and the subtle but unmistakable shift in atmosphere that occurs when two people who have acknowledged deeper feelings for each other must navigate the complex terrain of transitioning from professional colleagues to something more personally significant. The familiar rhythms of school life resumed with their customary challenges and demands, yet beneath the surface of administrative meetings, curriculum discussions, and student discipline issues, both Principal Brown and Miss Simian were acutely aware of the unresolved emotional territory that lay between them like uncharted waters waiting to be explored. Their first encounter upon returning to Elmore Junior High occurred during the pre-semester faculty meeting, where the usual discussions about new initiatives, schedule adjustments, and upcoming state assessments took on an undercurrent of personal awareness that made even routine professional interactions feel charged with additional meaning. Principal Brown found himself hyper-conscious of Miss Simian's presence in the conference room, noting the way morning sunlight caught the subtle variations in her carefully styled hair, the thoughtful expression that crossed her features when she considered his proposals for curriculum enhancement, and the measured cadence of her voice when she offered suggestions that demonstrated her characteristic blend of practical wisdom and educational expertise. For her part, Miss Simian discovered that her attention during the meeting was divided between the legitimate professional concerns being discussed and her growing awareness of Principal Brown's nervous energy, the way his hands moved expressively as he outlined his vision for the spring semester, and the particular warmth in his voice when he acknowledged her contributions to the ongoing conversation. The familiar comfort of their professional collaboration remained intact, but it was now layered with an emotional complexity that added new dimensions to every interaction. The challenge of maintaining appropriate professional boundaries while acknowledging their evolving personal connection became apparent during their first private administrative meeting of the new semester. The agenda items were routine budget projections, staffing considerations, and preparation for the upcoming accreditation review. Yet both participants found it difficult to focus entirely on these practical matters. When every shared glance and moment of comfortable silence seemed to carry implications that extended far beyond the immediate requirements of school administration, Principal Brown had spent considerable time over the winter break reflecting on the conversation that had marked the turning point in their relationship, analyzing not just the words that had been spoken, but also the emotional undercurrents that had transformed a professional discussion into something approaching a personal confession. He had come to understand that his feelings for Miss Simian represented more than simple attraction or admiration for a valued colleague, but rather a deep appreciation for the unique combination of wisdom, strength, and vulnerability that she had gradually revealed to him during their months of collaboration. The realization that he was developing genuine romantic feelings for someone with whom he worked so closely created both excitement and anxiety about how to proceed without jeopardizing the professional partnership that had become so central to his effectiveness as an educational leader. The potential consequences of misreading her intentions or moving too quickly toward a more personal relationship could include not only personal embarrassment, but also the destruction of the collaborative dynamic that had proven so beneficial for their school community. Miss Simian faced her own complex set of considerations as she contemplated the possibility of allowing their relationship to evolve beyond professional boundaries. Her vast experience with human relationships across countless decades had taught her both the potential joys and inevitable sorrows that accompanied intimate connections, particularly when those connections involved individuals whose lifespans and life experiences differed so dramatically from her own. The prospect of opening her heart to someone who could not possibly understand the full scope of her personal history created vulnerabilities that she had spent centuries learning to avoid. Yet there was something about Principal Brown's genuine interest in her thoughts and perspectives, his apparent appreciation for the wisdom that came from her extensive experience, and his willingness to share his own uncertainties and challenges that made her consider the possibility of taking emotional risks she had long considered too dangerous to contemplate. The loneliness that had been her constant companion for so many years seemed less overwhelming when she was in his presence, and the prospect of continuing to face the challenges of educational leadership without the personal connection they had begun to develop felt increasingly unappealing. Their first tentative steps toward acknowledging the romantic potential of their relationship occurred during a series of small, carefully chosen gestures that allowed both of them to test the waters without making commitments that could not be easily reversed if their feelings proved to be one-sided or incompatible with their professional responsibilities. Principal Brown began bringing flowers from his garden to brighten Miss Simian's classroom, ostensibly as a gesture of appreciation for her mentorship and support, but chosen and presented with a care and attention that suggested deeper motivations. Miss Simian responded to these offerings with a grace and pleasure that encouraged his growing boldness, taking time to arrange the flowers in prominent locations where they would be visible throughout her teaching day, and mentioning their beauty during conversations, in ways that indicated she understood and appreciated the personal significance of his gifts. Her acceptance of these small tokens of affection provided the encouragement he needed to contemplate more direct expressions of his growing feelings. The transition from subtle gestures to explicit romantic interest occurred during a particularly challenging week in February, when a combination of state assessment preparations, parent conference scheduling, and the usual midwinter malaise that affected both students and faculty created an atmosphere of stress and exhaustion throughout the school building. The accumulated pressures of managing these multiple demands while maintaining the appearance of calm, competent leadership had pushed both Principal Brown and Miss Simian to their limits of professional endurance. It was during this period of heightened stress that they found themselves working late into the evening once again, their collaboration on crisis management, creating opportunities for the kind of intimate conversation that had become increasingly important to both of them. As they reviewed student performance data and discussed intervention strategies for struggling learners, their professional focus was gradually supplemented by personal check-ins about how each was managing the psychological and emotional demands of their respective roles. The conversation that emerged from these practical concerns revealed the depth of care and concern they had developed for each other's well-being, extending far beyond the typical collegial interest in professional effectiveness to encompass genuine worry about personal happiness, health, and fulfillment. Principal Brown found himself asking questions about Miss Simian's stress levels, sleep patterns, and overall life satisfaction, with the kind of detailed attention that indicated personal rather than professional interest in her answers. Miss Simian, responding to this unexpected level of personal concern, shared more specific information about her daily routines, her methods for managing the emotional demands of teaching difficult students, and her strategies for maintaining perspective during particularly challenging periods. These revelations created opportunities for Principal Brown to offer support and assistance that went beyond their formal administrative partnership, suggesting possibilities for personal care and companionship that both of them found increasingly appealing. The evening concluded with their first explicitly romantic moment, when Principal Brown, emboldened by the intimacy of their conversation, and encouraged by what he interpreted as receptiveness to his personal interest, took the risk of directly acknowledging his feelings. His declaration was carefully worded to respect her autonomy and their professional relationship, while also making clear that he hoped she might be interested in exploring the possibility of a more personal connection between them. Miss Simian's response revealed both the depth of her own feelings and the complexity of her concerns about pursuing a romantic relationship with someone whose life, circumstances, and personal history were so different from her own. She acknowledged that she had developed strong feelings of affection and attraction for him, but also expressed uncertainty about whether it would be wise to act on these feelings given the potential complications that could arise from mixing their professional partnership with romantic involvement. Their conversation continued deep into the night as they explored the practical and emotional challenges that would accompany any attempt to transform their working relationship into something more personally intimate. The question of how to maintain professional effectiveness while nurturing romantic feelings, the potential impact of their relationship on other faculty members and the broader school community, and the personal risks involved in becoming emotionally vulnerable to someone who played such a central role in their daily lives, all required careful consideration and honest discussion. By the time they finally decided to leave the building that night, they had reached a tentative agreement to explore the possibility of a romantic relationship while maintaining clear boundaries between their personal and professional interactions. The decision to move forward cautiously, with full awareness of the potential challenges and complications that lay ahead, represented a significant step toward the deeper connection they both desired, while also acknowledging the legitimate concerns that made such a relationship potentially problematic. Their first official date occurred the following weekend, carefully planned for a time and location that would allow them to interact as private individuals rather than as professional colleagues. The restaurant Principal Brown had chosen was located in a neighboring town, far enough from their usual haunts to minimize the risk of encountering students, parents, or other faculty members who might draw conclusions about the nature of their relationship before they were ready to make any public announcements about their evolving personal connection. The nervous energy that accompanied this transition from professional colleagues to romantic partners was evident in both of their behaviors as they navigated the unfamiliar territory of courtship later in life. Principal Brown found himself second-guessing his conversation topics, wondering whether his usual enthusiasm for educational theory and school improvement initiatives would be appropriate for a romantic dinner, or whether he should attempt to discuss subjects that seemed more traditionally suited to intimate conversations between potential partners. Miss Simian faced her own uncertainties about how to present herself in this new context, balancing her desire to remain authentic with her awareness that certain aspects of her personal history and life experience might be difficult for Principal Brown to understand or accept. The careful editing required to share meaningful personal information without revealing details that could strain credulity or create unnecessary complications added an element of performance to what she hoped could become a genuinely intimate relationship. Despite these initial awkwardnesses, their dinner conversation gradually found its natural rhythm as they discovered that the intellectual compatibility and emotional understanding that had developed through their professional partnership translated effectively into more personal exchanges. Their shared commitment to education provided common ground for discussing their individual career paths, their philosophical approaches to teaching and learning, and their hopes for the future of their school and their own professional development. More significantly, the relaxed atmosphere of the restaurant setting and the explicit acknowledgement of their romantic interest created opportunities for more personal revelations about their individual backgrounds, family relationships, and life experiences outside the realm of education. Principal Brown shared stories about his childhood, his family relationships, and his previous romantic connections in ways that helped Miss Simian understand the personal history that had shaped his approach to relationships and his readiness for a more serious romantic commitment. Miss Simian reciprocated with carefully chosen anecdotes from her own past, selecting experiences that would help Principal Brown understand her perspective on love, commitment, and the challenges of maintaining intimate relationships while managing the demanding responsibilities of educational leadership. Her stories were edited for believability and relevance, but they provided genuine insights into her character, values, and emotional needs that encouraged his growing feelings of affection and compatibility. The evening concluded with both of them expressing cautious optimism about the potential for their relationship to develop into something meaningful and sustaining, while also acknowledging the need to proceed carefully to protect both their personal feelings and their professional partnership. The goodnight kiss they shared was tentative but promising, carrying implications of deeper intimacy to come, while also respecting the boundaries they had established around the pace of their romantic development. In the weeks that followed their first official date, Principal Brown and Miss Simian began the delicate process of integrating their romantic relationship with their continued professional collaboration. This balancing act required constant attention to maintaining appropriate boundaries during school hours, while also finding opportunities to nurture their personal connection during their private time together. Their growing comfort with each other as romantic partners enhanced rather than complicated their effectiveness as educational leaders, as the deeper understanding and trust they developed through intimate conversations translated into even more seamless cooperation in addressing school challenges and opportunities. The emotional support they provided for each other during stressful periods strengthened their individual capacity to serve their school community, while also deepening the personal bond that connected them beyond their shared professional mission. The recognition that they had found in each other not just compatible colleagues but also genuine life partners became apparent as their relationship progressed through the remaining months of the school year. Their different perspectives on education, shaped by vastly different amounts of experience and exposure to diverse teaching contexts, created a complementary dynamic that enriched both of their approaches to the challenges and opportunities they encountered in their shared work. Principal Brown's optimistic vision of educational possibility was grounded and refined by Miss Simian's realistic understanding of institutional limitations and human nature, while her sometimes cynical worldview was brightened and energized by his persistent faith in the potential for positive change and meaningful impact. Together, they created an approach to educational leadership that balanced idealism with pragmatism, innovation with tradition, and hope with experience in ways that served their school community while also nourishing their individual growth as educators and human beings. As spring arrived and brought with it the annual rhythm of testing seasons, graduation preparations, and planning for the following academic year, both Principal Brown and Miss Simian had come to understand that their relationship represented something rare and precious in their lives, a partnership that enriched both their professional effectiveness and their personal fulfillment in ways that neither had expected to find in the corridors of a public school building. The phenomenon that was Gumball Watterson and his adopted brother Darwin had achieved a kind of legendary status within the halls of Elmore Junior High, long before Principal Brown and Miss Simian's romantic relationship had begun to complicate their professional responses to the endless stream of crises, catastrophes, and inexplicable incidents that seemed to follow these two students like storm clouds trailing lightning and thunder. Their capacity for transforming ordinary school days into elaborate adventures involving time travel, supernatural encounters, and reality-bending scenarios that defied both logical explanation and conventional disciplinary measures had tested the patience and sanity of every educator who had ever attempted to provide them with a traditional academic experience. The morning that would later be remembered as the Great Cafeteria Incident of late March began with what appeared to be a perfectly normal Tuesday, complete with the usual complement of announcements over the public address system. The familiar sounds of locker doors slamming and sneakers squeaking against polished floors, and the general atmosphere of controlled chaos that characterized the transition period between homeroom and first period classes. Principal Brown had arrived at school that morning, feeling particularly optimistic about the day ahead, having spent the previous evening in Miss Simian's company, discussing their shared vision for the upcoming spring festival and the satisfaction they both derived from their increasingly harmonious collaboration in all aspects of school administration. Miss Simian, for her part, had begun her day with the measured confidence that came from decades of experience managing classroom dynamics and student behavior, though she carried with her the pleasant distraction of remembering Principal Brown's thoughtful gesture of bringing her favorite tea during their morning conversation in his office. The delicate balance they had achieved between their professional partnership and their growing romantic connection seemed to be enhancing rather than complicating their effectiveness as educational leaders, creating a sense of mutual support and understanding that strengthened their individual capacity to handle whatever challenges their students might present. The first indication that this particular Tuesday would not unfold according to normal patterns came during second period, when a series of increasingly frantic reports began arriving from various corners of the building about unusual occurrences that seemed somehow connected to the Watterson brothers' presence in different locations throughout the P's school. The reports themselves were so bizarre and contradictory that Principal Brown initially dismissed them as the kind of exaggerated gossip that typically accompanied any incident involving Gumball and Darwin, whose reputations for generating extraordinary situations had created a tendency among staff and students to attribute supernatural properties to even their most mundane activities. However, as the morning progressed and the reports became both more frequent and more detailed, it became apparent that something genuinely unusual was occurring within the building. Teachers described witnessing conversations between Gumball and what appeared to be inanimate objects, including classroom desks that seemed to respond with appropriate gestures and a water fountain that allegedly participated in a debate about proper hydration techniques. Darwin was reportedly seen consulting with a group of textbooks that had arranged themselves into a semicircle in the library, their pages fluttering in patterns that suggested they were actively participating in some form of academic discussion. The cafeteria incident that would define the day reached its crescendo during fourth period lunch, when what began as a simple disagreement about the nutritional value of the day's menu selections escalated into a full-scale food fight that somehow managed to involve not only the students present, but also various kitchen appliances that seemed to have developed opinions about proper meal préparation technique. Witnesses reported seeing the industrial-sized mixer launching mashed potatoes with precision accuracy, while the coffee machine appeared to be providing strategic advice to students about optimal trajectory calculations for airborne vegetables. Principal Brown's initial response to the emergency calls from the cafeteria was to assume that the reports were exaggerated accounts of a typical food fight, the kind of minor disciplinary situation that could be handled through standard procedures involving detention assignments, cleanup duties, and strongly worded conversations with parents about appropriate school behavior. However, when he arrived at the scene and witnessed firsthand the spectacle of kitchen equipment apparently acting with independent volition, while Gumball delivered what appeared to be a passionate speech about the fundamental rights of processed foods, he realized that this situation would require intervention strategies that extended far beyond conventional disciplinary measures. Miss Simian's arrival at the cafeteria shortly after Principal Brown created an interesting dynamic in their response to the crisis, as their growing personal relationship added layers of non-verbal communication and mutual support that enhanced their ability to coordinate their actions, while also creating potential complications when their different approaches to Paya Unday, managing extraordinary situations, came into conflict. Principal Brown's tendency towards systematic problem-solving and adherence to established procedures clashed with Miss Simian's inclination to rely on intuitive responses based on her extensive experience with inexplicable student behavior. The tension between their different management styles became apparent as they attempted to restore order to the chaotic scene, while also trying to understand exactly what had triggered this particular manifestation of the Watterson brothers' apparent ability to bend reality around their immediate needs and interests. Principal Brown's efforts to follow standard emergency protocols were repeatedly thwarted by the surreal nature of the situation, while Miss Simian's attempts to impose traditional classroom discipline proved ineffective against phenomena that seemed to operate according to rules that had never been covered in any educational training program. Their first significant disagreement as a romantic couple occurred in full view of students, faculty, and apparently sentient kitchen equipment, when Principal Brown insisted on evacuating the cafeteria according to fire safety procedures, while Miss Simian argued that removing the students from the immediate area would only allow the situation to spread to other parts of the building. The debate that followed revealed underlying differences in their approaches to crisis management that had been masked by their previous focus on more conventional administrative challenges. Principal Brown's systematic, policy-driven approach reflected his fundamental belief that educational institutions required clear procedures and consistent application of established rules to maintain order and safety for all members of the school community. His insistence on following proper protocols, even in extraordinary circumstances, stemmed from his conviction that abandoning standard procedures would create dangerous precedents and undermine the authority structures that kept schools functioning effectively under normal conditions. Miss Simian's more intuitive, experience-based approach drew upon her extensive exposure to unusual student behaviors and inexplicable incidents that had taught her the importance of adapting responses to match the specific characteristics of each unique situation. Her resistance to evacuation procedures reflected her understanding that Gumball and Darwin's adventures often followed patterns that could be managed through direct intervention rather than institutional responses designed for more convencional emergencias. The resolution of their disagreement came when they realized that their different perspectives could be combined into a more effective response strategy that utilized both systematic planning and flexible adaptation to the extraordinary circumstances they were facing. Principal Brown's organizational skills proved invaluable for coordinating the complex logistics of managing the situation while maintaining communication with district officials and emergency services, while Miss Simian's ability to communicate directly with Gumball and Darwin about the consequences of their actions provided the personal intervention necessary to encourage their cooperation in resolving the crisis. Working together, they managed to convince the apparently animated kitchen equipment to return to its normal inanimate state, while also negotiating with Gumball and Darwin about appropriate methods for expressing their concerns about cafeteria, food quality, through channels that would not involve supernatural intervention or reality manipulation. The process required nearly 2 hours of patient discussion, creative problem-solving, and the kind of diplomatic skills that were typically reserved for international negotiations rather than middle school disciplinary situations. The aftermath of the cafeteria incident provided Principal Brown and Miss Simian with their first opportunity to process a major crisis as both professional partners and romantic companions, creating a complex emotional landscape that required them to separate their personal feelings about each other's performance from their objective assessment of how effectively they had handled an extraordinary situation. The stress of managing such an unusual emergency, while also navigating disagreements about appropriate response strategies, had tested both their professional collaboration and their personal relationship in ways they had not previously experienced. Their debriefing conversation that evening revealed both the strength and the vulnerability of their evolving partnership as they discussed not only the practical lessons learned from the day's events, but also their individual, emotional responses to finding themselves in conflict during a high-pressure situation. Principal Brown acknowledged that his insistence on following standard procedures had been motivated partly by his need to maintain a sense of control and competence in the face of circumstances that challenged his understanding of what was possible within a school environment. Miss Simian admitted that her resistance to his evacuation plan had been influenced by her protective instincts towards students she had taught for many years, as well as her concern that his relative inexperience with extraordinary situations might lead to responses that would escalate rather than resolve the crisis. Her feedback about his leadership during the incident was honest but gentle, acknowledging his strengths while also pointing out areas where his approach could be refined through greater attention to the unique characteristics of their particular student population. The conversation concluded with both of them expressing appreciation for how their different perspectives had ultimately contributed to a successful resolution of an impossible situation, while also acknowledging that future crises would require them to develop better methods for coordinating their responses without allowing their personal relationship to interfere with their professional effectiveness. The experience had taught them valuable lessons about the importance of clear communication and mutual respect during high-stress situations, lessons that would strengthen both their administrative partnership and their romantic connection. The pattern established during the cafeteria incident repeated itself with variations throughout the spring semester as Gumball and Darwin continued to generate extraordinary situations that tested Principal Brown and Miss Simian's ability to balance their personal feelings with their professional responsibilities. Each new crisis provided opportunities for them to refine their collaborative approach to managing impossible circumstances, while also deepening their understanding of how their individual strengths and weaknesses complemented each other in both professional and personal contexts. The incident involving Tobias Wilson's apparent transformation into a rainbow-colored geometric shape during art class required them to coordinate their response with the fire department, the health department, and several specialists from the district office who had experience with unexplained phenomena affecting student safety. Principal Brown's methodical documentation of the incident and his careful communication with external agencies proved essential for managing the bureaucratic aspects of the situation, while Miss Simian's direct intervention with Tobias and his classmates provided the personal attention necessary to ensure that all students remained calm and cooperative throughout the resolution process. The day when Bobbert's internal systems somehow synchronized with the school's computer network, creating a feedback loop that caused every electronic device in the building to display his homework assignments while broadcasting his internal monologue over the public address system, presented a different set of challenges that required both technical expertise and diplomatic skills. Principal Brown's background in educational technology allowed him to work effectively with the district's IT specialists to isolate and resolve the technical problems, while Miss Simian's understanding of Bobbert's unique social and emotional needs helped her guide him through the embarrassment and confusion that resulted from having his private thoughts shared with the entire school community. The seemingly simple situation involving Banana Joe's comedy routine during a school assembly became extraordinarily complicated when his jokes apparently gained the power to manifest as physical reality, transforming the auditorium into a surreal landscape where punchlines became actual punch bowls and comedic timing was measured in geological epochs rather than seconds. The challenge of maintaining student safety while also preserving Banana Joe's fragile confidence as a performer required Principal Brown and Miss Simian to coordinate their efforts with the drama teacher, the custodial staff, and eventually several members of the local comedy community who volunteered their expertise in managing situations where humor transcended normal boundaries between imagination and reality. Each of these incidents provided opportunities for Principal Brown and Miss Simian to strengthen their partnership, while also testing their ability to maintain appropriate professional boundaries during high-stress situations that required intense collaboration and mutual support. The emotional intimacy that had developed through their romantic relationship enhanced their capacity to communicate effectively and provide each other with the kind of understanding and encouragement that sustained them through particularly challenging periods. However, the same emotional connection that strengthened their professional partnership also created potential complications when their different approaches to student discipline or crisis management brought them into conflict during situations that required immediate action and coordinated responses. Learning to disagree constructively while maintaining their effectiveness as educational leaders became an essential skill that strengthened both their working relationship and their personal bond. The cumulative effect of managing so many extraordinary situations together was to create a shared body of experience that belonged uniquely to their partnership, memories and insights that could not be fully understood by colleagues who had not witnessed firsthand the impossible transformations and reality-bending adventures that seemed to follow certain students throughout their academic careers. This shared understanding became a foundation for deeper intimacy and mutual appreciation that enriched both their professional collaboration and their romantic connection in ways that neither had anticipated when their relationship first began to evolve beyond purely collegial boundaries. As the school year progressed toward its conclusion, and they reflected on the challenges they had faced and overcome together, both Principal Brown and Miss Simian recognized that their partnership had been strengthened rather than strained by the extraordinary demands placed upon them by their most challenging students. The crises that might have created insurmountable obstacles for administrators working in isolation had become opportunities for growth, learning, and deeper connection when faced by two people whose different perspectives and complementary skills allowed them to find creative solutions to impossible problems. The understanding that they could trust each other to provide support, wisdom, and companionship during even the most stressful and surreal situations created a foundation of confidence and security that would sustain their relationship through whatever challenges lay ahead. Whether those challenges involved supernatural cafeteria incidents, reality-bending student projects, or the more mundane but equally demanding responsibilities of educational leadership. In an institution where the extraordinary had become routine and the impossible was just another day at the office. The transformation that occurred within both Principal Brown and Miss Simian during their first full academic year as romantic partners extended far beyond the obvious changes in their personal happiness and emotional fulfillment, reaching into the fundamental ways they approached their individual roles as educational leaders and their shared mission of creating an environment where learning could flourish, despite the extraordinary challenges presented by their unique student population. The lessons they learned about patience, flexibility, and the importance of viewing setbacks as opportunities for growth emerged not from educational theory or professional development workshops, but from the daily practice of supporting each other through the complex demands of managing both a relationship and an institution that seemed to operate according to rules that defied conventional understanding. Principal Brown's evolution as an administrator became apparent to faculty members and students alike, as he gradually developed the kind of calm confidence that comes from having weathered numerous crises in the company of someone whose wisdom and experience provide both practical guidance and emotional stability during moments of uncertainty and stress. His initial tendency toward rigid adherence to established procedures and district mandates gave way to a more nuanced approach that balanced institutional requirements with creative problem-solving strategies adapted to the specific needs of situations that rarely fit neatly into predetermined categories of administrative response. The change in his leadership style was perhaps most evident during faculty meetings, where his presentations evolved from formal recitations of policy updates and procedural requirements into genuine discussions that acknowledged the complexity of their shared work and the importance of collaborative problem-solving in addressing challenges that could not be resolved through simple application of standard educational practices. His willingness to admit uncertainty, ask for input from experienced teachers, and modify his plans based on feedback from colleagues reflected a growing understanding that effective leadership required humility and flexibility rather than unwavering adherence to predetermined strategies. Miss Simian's influence on his professional development was subtle but profound, manifesting not through direct criticism or explicit instruction, but through the daily example of her measured responses to crisis situations, her ability to maintain perspective during periods of intense stress, and her skill at reading the underlying emotional and social dynamics that often determined whether administrative interventions would succeed or fail. Watching her navigate complex disciplinary situations with students whose behavior patterns defied conventional approaches taught him invaluable lessons about the importance of understanding individual circumstances rather than simply enforcing universal rules. The patience that Principal Brown developed through his relationship with Miss Simian extended beyond his personal interactions with her to encompass his approach to the slow, often frustrating work of institutional change and educational improvement. Her centuries of experience with the cyclical nature of educational reforms had taught her that meaningful progress occurred through consistent, persistent effort over extended periods, rather than through dramatic initiatives that promised rapid transformation, but often collapsed under the weight of unrealistic expectations and insufficient preparation. This perspective helped Principal Brown understand that the disappointing test scores, persistent disciplinary challenges, and ongoing resource limitations that had initially frustrated his efforts to quickly improve the school's performance were not indicators of personal failure, but rather normal aspects of the long-term process of building institutional capacity and supporting individual growth among students and faculty members. The understanding that change occurred gradually, often invisibly, through countless small improvements and individual breakthroughs, allowed him to celebrate modest victories while maintaining realistic expectations about the time and effort required to achieve larger goals. His growing appreciation for the complexities of human motivation and behavior, developed through countless conversations with Miss Simian about the factors that influence student performance and faculty morale, led to more sophisticated approaches to addressing persistent problems within the school community. Rather than assuming that poor academic performance was simply a matter of insufficient effort, or that behavioral issues reflected character defects requiring punitive responses, he began to investigate the underlying causes that contributed to these surface manifestations of deeper challenges. This shift in perspective resulted in initiatives that addressed root causes rather than merely managing symptoms, such as establishing mentoring programs that paired struggling students with older peers who had overcome similar challenges, creating professional development opportunities that help teachers develop skills for working with students whose backgrounds and experiences differed significantly from their own, and implementing support services that recognized the connection between student well-being and academic achievement. Miss Simian's own transformation through their relationship was perhaps less immediately visible to outside observers, but no less significant in its impact on her effectiveness as an educator and her satisfaction with her chosen profession. The cynicism that had accumulated over centuries of witnessing the same patterns of human behavior repeat themselves across different historical contexts began to soften under the influence of Principal Brown's persistent optimism and his genuine belief in the potential for positive change, even in situations that seemed hopeless or intractable. His enthusiasm for educational innovation and his faith in the ability of individual teachers to make meaningful differences in students' lives reminded her of aspects of teaching that she had once found inspiring but had gradually forgotten during the long years of watching reform efforts fail and watching promising students struggle against obstacles that seemed beyond their control. The renewal of her sense of purpose and possibility did not eliminate her hard-won understanding of institutional limitations and human frailties, but it did restore her appreciation for the moments of genuine connection and breakthrough that made the daily challenges of education worthwhile. The combination of his optimistic vision with her realistic understanding of practical constraints created a partnership that was more effective than either of their individual approaches could have been. Principal Brown's proposals for new programs and initiatives were strengthened by Miss Simian's insights about potential obstacles and implementation challenges, while her tendency toward caution and skepticism was balanced by his willingness to take calculated risks in pursuit of meaningful improvement. Their collaborative approach to professional development became a model for other faculty members, who observed how their different perspectives could complement each other rather than create conflict. Teachers began to seek out partnerships with colleagues whose strengths differed from their own, creating interdisciplinary teams that could address student needs more comprehensively than any individual educator working in isolation. The improvement in school climate that resulted from their partnership became evident in multiple measures of institutional health and effectiveness. Student disciplinary referrals decreased as teachers developed more sophisticated strategies for managing behavioral challenges, while academic performance improved as innovative instructional approaches were implemented with the kind of administrative support and flexibility that made experimentation possible without creating unreasonable risks for student learning outcomes. Faculty morale increased significantly as teachers felt more supported in their professional growth and more confident in their ability to address the complex challenges presented by their diverse student population. The sense of shared mission and collective efficacy that developed among staff members created a positive feedback loop that enhanced both individual job satisfaction and institutional effectiveness. The recognition of their success came not only from district officials who noted the statistical improvements in various performance measures, but also from parents and community members who observed changes in their children's attitudes towards school and learning. Students who had previously approached their education with resignation or active resistance began to demonstrate engagement and enthusiasm that reflected the improved relationships and learning opportunities they were experiencing in their classrooms. The professional innovations that emerged from Principal Brown and Miss Simian's partnership extended beyond their individual school to influence practices throughout the district as other administrators sought to understand, replicate the collaborative approaches that had produced such positive results. Their willingness to share their experiences and insights through presentations at professional conferences and articles in educational journals contributed to broader conversations about effective leadership and the importance of building supportive partnerships among educational professionals. The development of their tag team approach to crisis management became legendary among their colleagues, who marveled at their ability to coordinate their responses to complex situations without apparent prior consultation or detailed planning. The intuitive understanding they had developed of each other's strengths, preferences, and communication styles allowed them to divide responsibilities and support each other's efforts with remarkable efficiency and effectiveness. During routine situations, Principal Brown typically took the lead on interactions that required systematic analysis, policy interpretation, and communication with external stakeholders, while Miss Simian focused on direct work with students, teachers, and parents that drew upon her extensive experience and interpersonal skills. However, they had also developed the flexibility to adjust these roles based on the specific requirements of individual situations and the particular expertise that each crisis demanded. Their reputation for handling extraordinary situations with competence and creativity attracted attention from education researchers who were interested in studying how successful partnerships developed and sustained themselves over time. The case studies and research projects that documented their collaborative approaches provided valuable insights for other educational leaders who were seeking to develop more effective working relationships with their colleagues. The legacy they were building together extended beyond the immediate improvements in their school's performance to encompass broader contributions to the profession of education and the communities they served. Students who benefited from their innovative approaches to discipline, instruction, and support services would carry those positive experiences into their adult lives, potentially influencing their own approaches to learning, problem solving, and collaboration in ways that would benefit future generations. Faculty members who learned collaborative skills through their example would apply those lessons in future positions and partnerships, spreading the influence of their innovative approaches throughout the broader educational community. The culture of mutual support, creative problem solving, and shared accountability that they had helped establish would persist long after their individual careers ended, creating lasting improvements in institutional effectiveness and professional satisfaction. The understanding that their partnership had created something greater than the sum of its individual parts provided both Principal Brown and Miss Simian with deep satisfaction and motivation to continue refining their collaborative approaches while also nurturing the personal relationship that served as the foundation for their professional success. The recognition that they had found not only compatible life partners, but also ideal professional collaborators, created a sense of gratitude and fulfillment that enriched both aspects of their shared life together. As they looked toward the future and contemplated the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead, both individually and as a partnership, they carried with them the confidence that comes from having successfully navigated complex demands and achieved meaningful success through mutual support, shared vision, and complementary strengths. The growth they had experienced through their relationship had prepared them not only for continued effectiveness in their current roles, but also for whatever new adventures and challenges might await them in the years ahead. The conversations that unfolded between Principal Brown and Miss Simian during the quiet evening hours, when the demands of daily school administration had been set aside, and they could explore the deeper philosophical questions that their shared work had raised, revealed dimensions of intellectual compatibility and spiritual connection that neither had expected to discover in the practical environment of public education. These discussions, which often began with specific concerns about individual students or institutional challenges, gradually expanded into explorations of fundamental questions about the nature of learning, the purpose of education in human society, and the meaning of their individual contributions to the grand project of helping young minds develop the knowledge, skills, and wisdom they would need to navigate an increasingly complex world. Miss Simian's perspective on these profound questions was informed by her unique position as someone who had observed the evolution of educational practices across vast stretches of time, witnessing the rise and fall of pedagogical theories, the cyclical nature of reform movements, and the persistent patterns of human learning that remained constant despite changing technologies, social structures, and cultural contexts. Her insights about the fundamental purposes of education drew upon experiences that spanned multiple civilizations, allowing her to identify the essential elements of effective teaching that transcended specific historical periods or cultural traditions. She spoke with particular eloquence about the relationship between knowledge acquisition and wisdom development, explaining how the accumulation of facts and skills, while necessary for practical functioning in any given society, represented only the foundation for the deeper understanding that allowed individuals to make meaningful contributions to their communities and find personal fulfillment in their chosen endeavors. The distinction between mere information transfer and genuine education, she argued, lay in the teacher's ability to help students develop critical thinking abilities, emotional intelligence, and ethical reasoning that would serve them throughout their lives, regardless of how their specific career paths or life circumstances might evolve. Principal Brown's contributions to these philosophical discussions reflected his more recent but equally passionate engagement with educational theory and his growing understanding of how idealistic visions could be translated into practical improvements in students' daily learning experiences. His perspective was shaped by contemporary research in cognitive science, developmental psychology, and educational methodology, but his romantic relationship with Miss Simian had taught him to view these modern insights within the broader context of human learning patterns that had persisted across centuries and millennia. His questions about the relationship between individual student needs and institutional requirements, the balance between academic rigor and emotional support, and the challenge of preparing students for an uncertain future while grounding them in enduring values, revealed a mind that was genuinely engaged with the complexities of educational leadership, rather than simply implementing predetermined policies or following established procedures. The depth of his concern for student welfare and his commitment to creating learning environments that honored both intellectual growth and personal development demonstrated the kind of authentic dedication that Miss Simian had rarely encountered in her extensive experience with educational administrators. Their discussions about the cyclical nature of educational reform provided particularly rich ground for exploration, as Miss Simian's historical perspective allowed her to trace the recurring patterns of innovation, implementation, evaluation, and revision that characterized attempts to improve schooling across different eras and cultural contexts. She had witnessed the introduction of seemingly revolutionary approaches to curriculum design, instructional methodology, and student assessment that were later abandoned when they failed to produce the dramatic improvements their proponents had promised, only to be rediscovered and reintroduced by subsequent generations of reformers who were unaware of their predecessors' experiences. This pattern of cyclical rediscovery, she explained, was not necessarily evidence of futility or failure in educational innovation, but rather an indication of the fundamental challenge involved in adapting teaching practices to serve diverse student populations within institutional structures that were themselves products of complex social, political, and economic forces. The most successful reforms, in her experience, were those that recognized and built upon enduring principles of effective teaching while adapting specific techniques and approaches to address the particular needs and circumstances of contemporary students and communities. Principal Brown's response to these insights reflected his growing appreciation for the importance of institutional memory and the value of learning from past experiences, rather than assuming that current challenges were unprecedented, or that contemporary solutions were necessarily superior to previous approaches. His initial enthusiasm for the latest educational technologies and innovative pedagogical methods had been tempered by Miss Simian's gentle guidance toward a more balanced perspective that valued both innovation and tradition, both cutting-edge research and time-tested practices. The evolution of his thinking about educational leadership, shaped by their intimate conversations and collaborative experiences, demonstrated the kind of intellectual growth that occurs when genuinely curious minds engage with different perspectives in an atmosphere of mutual respect and shared commitment to important goals. His questions became more nuanced, his proposed solutions more carefully considered, and his understanding of the complexities involved in creating positive change more sophisticated as he learned to integrate Miss Simian's historical insights with his own contemporary knowledge and practical experience. Their exploration of the deeper purposes of education inevitably led to discussions about the relationship between schools and the broader communities they served, the responsibility of educators to prepare students for both individual success and civic participation, and the challenge of maintaining academic standards, while also addressing the social and emotional needs that influence students' ability to learn effectively. These conversations revealed shared values and complementary perspectives that strengthened their partnership, while also deepening their individual understanding of their professional mission. Miss Simian's observations about the connection between educational effectiveness and social stability drew upon her extensive experience with societies that had invested wisely in the intellectual and moral development of their citizens, as well as those that had neglected these fundamental responsibilities with predictably disastrous consequences. Her stories about educational systems that had successfully adapted to changing circumstances while maintaining their essential commitment to human development provided Principal Brown with valuable models for thinking about institutional change and continuity in his own context. The recognition that their work as educators placed them within a historical continuum that extended far beyond their individual careers created a sense of both humility and purpose that enriched their daily interactions with students, faculty, and parents. Understanding that they were contributing to patterns of human development and cultural transmission that had persisted across millennia helped them maintain perspective during periods of frustration or discouragement, while also inspiring them to take their responsibilities seriously as stewards of knowledge and wisdom for future generations. Principal Brown's growing awareness of mortality and the finite nature of human existence, deepened by his relationship with someone whose perspective transcended normal temporal limitations, created both poignancy and urgency in his approach to educational leadership. The understanding that his time as an administrator was necessarily limited, measured in years or decades rather than centuries, motivated him to focus his energy and attention on initiatives that could have lasting impact beyond his individual tenure, while also finding satisfaction in the daily interactions and small victories that might not be recorded in institutional histories, but were nonetheless meaningful to the individuals whose lives they touched. Miss Simian's experience with the temporary nature of human relationships and the inevitable cycle of loss that accompanied her immortal existence had taught her to value present moments while also maintaining the long-term perspective necessary for effective educational planning and institutional development. Her ability to appreciate both the immediate satisfaction of helping individual students overcome specific challenges and the broader significance of contributing to educational practices that would benefit future generations created a balanced approach to professional engagement that Principal Brown found both inspiring and instructive. Their conversations about the nature of legacy and permanent contribution revealed different but complementary approaches to finding meaning in work that was inherently temporary and often invisible in its most important effects. Principal Brown's concern about whether his efforts would be remembered or recognized after his retirement or death was balanced by Miss Simian's understanding that the most significant educational impacts were often those that could not be measured or attributed to specific individuals, but rather emerged from the cumulative effect of countless interactions between dedicated teachers and receptive students across extended periods of time. The courage required to invest deeply in work, whose most important outcomes might not be visible for years or decades, and whose ultimate success depended upon factors beyond any individual's control, became a recurring theme in their discussions about professional purpose and personal satisfaction. Miss Simian's example of maintaining passionate commitment to teaching, despite witnessing the repeated failure of educational reforms and the inevitable loss of beloved students and colleagues, provided Principal Brown with a model of sustainable dedication that could withstand disappointment and setback without losing its essential enthusiasm for the fundamental mission of education. Their exploration of these philosophical foundations created a shared language and conceptual framework that enhanced their practical collaboration while also deepening the intellectual and emotional intimacy that characterized their romantic relationship. The recognition that they were partners not only in the immediate work of school administration, but also in the broader project of contributing to human knowledge and wisdom, created bonds of connection that transcended the ordinary satisfactions of successful professional collaboration or compatible personal partnership. The understanding that love had fundamentally altered their individual perspectives on both their work and their lives became apparent as they reflected on how their relationship had changed their approaches to the daily challenges and opportunities that defined their professional experience. The emotional security and intellectual stimulation they provided for each other created conditions that supported risk-taking, creativity, and growth in ways that neither had experienced during their years of individual professional development. Principal Brown's willingness to experiment with innovative approaches to student discipline, faculty development, and community engagement had been encouraged by the knowledge that Miss Simian's support and wisdom would be available to help him navigate whatever challenges might emerge from these experiments. The confidence that came from knowing that his mistakes would be met with understanding rather than judgment, and that his successes would be genuinely celebrated by someone who understood their significance, created psychological conditions that fostered the kind of bold leadership that could produce meaningful institutional change. Miss Simian's renewed sense of possibility and purpose, inspired by Principal Brown's persistent optimism and genuine faith in the potential for positive change, had revitalized her engagement with the daily work of teaching and mentoring in ways that benefited both her individual students and the broader school community. The energy that came from feeling valued and understood by someone whose dedication matched her own had restored aspects of her professional enthusiasm that she had thought were permanently diminished by centuries of accumulated disappointment and loss. The transformation of their individual worldviews through their loving partnership created ripple effects that extended far beyond their personal satisfaction to influence their effectiveness as educational leaders and their contributions to the institutional culture of their school community. Students, faculty, and parents could observe the positive changes in their approach to challenges and opportunities, even when they were unaware of the personal relationship that had contributed to these professional improvements. As they contemplated the future of their partnership and their shared work in education, both Principal Brown and Miss Simian carried with them the understanding that their love had created something precious and rare, a relationship that enhanced rather than competed with their professional mission, a partnership that strengthened their individual effectiveness, while also providing the personal fulfillment that made their demanding work sustainable over the long term. The natural rhythms that governed life at Elmore Junior High had become as familiar and comforting to both Principal Brown and Miss Simian as the changing seasons themselves, creating a predictable framework within which their relationship could flourish, while also providing the stability necessary for effective educational leadership in an environment where unpredictability was often the only constant. The annual cycle of academic challenges and celebrations, administrative deadlines, and assessment periods, parent conferences and student performances had woven itself into the fabric of their shared existence in ways that made their partnership feel both natural and inevitable. The autumn months brought with them the familiar excitement and anxiety of new beginnings, as returning students reconnected with friends and adjusted to new teachers, while incoming students navigated the complex social and academic landscape of their unfamiliar environment. Principal Brown and Miss Simian had learned to anticipate and prepare for the specific challenges that accompanied each phase of this transitional period, from the initial chaos of schedule adjustments and locker assignments to the gradual establishment of classroom routines and behavioral expectations that would define the academic year ahead. Their collaborative approach to managing the September rush had evolved into a well-choreographed dance of complementary responsibilities and mutual support that impressed veteran faculty members who had witnessed numerous administrative transitions over the years. Principal Brown's systematic approach to logistical coordination ensured that buses arrived on schedule, textbooks were distributed efficiently, and emergency procedures were communicated clearly to all members of the school community. Miss Simian's intuitive understanding of student psychology and group dynamics helped identify potential problems before they escalated into crises, while also creating opportunities for positive peer interactions that could set the tone for successful academic and social experiences throughout the year. The October settling period provided them with opportunities to assess the effectiveness of their summer planning and make necessary adjustments to programs and policies based on the actual needs and circumstances they observed in their daily interactions with students, faculty, and parents. This process of continuous refinement and adaptation had become one of the hallmarks of their administrative partnership, reflecting their shared commitment to evidence-based decision-making rather than rigid adherence to predetermined strategies that might not address the specific challenges facing their school community. The particular satisfaction they found in this collaborative problem-solving process stemmed not only from their professional effectiveness, but also from the personal intimacy that allowed them to communicate complex ideas and subtle observations through brief conversations and meaningful glances that would have been incomprehensible to outside observers. Their ability to coordinate their responses to challenging situations without extensive consultation or detailed planning had become legendary among their colleagues, who marveled at the apparent telepathic communication that characterized their interactions during faculty meetings and crisis situations. November brought its own distinctive challenges as the initial enthusiasm of the new academic year gave way to the more sustained effort required for long-term learning and growth. Students who had begun the year with optimistic resolutions about improved study habits and better classroom behavior often struggled to maintain their motivation as assignments became more demanding and social pressures intensified. The darker days and colder weather that characterized the late autumn months created additional stresses that affected both academic performance and behavioral patterns in ways that required careful attention and creative intervention strategies. Principal Brown and Miss Simian had developed a repertoire of responses to these predictable seasonal challenges that drew upon both research-based best practices and their accumulated experience with the specific needs and characteristics of their student population. Their November initiatives included targeted academic support programs for students who were beginning to struggle with coursework that had become more challenging than their initial assignments, social-emotional learning activities designed to help students develop coping strategies for managing stress and interpersonal conflicts, and family engagement events that strengthened the connections between home and school that were essential for student success. The winter months presented their own unique combination of opportunities and obstacles as holiday celebrations provided welcome breaks from academic routines while also creating disruptions that could interfere with learning momentum and classroom management. The approach that Principal Brown and Miss Simian had developed for managing this delicate balance reflected their shared understanding that educational institutions needed to honor both academic rigor and human needs for celebration, rest, and connection with family and community traditions. Their December faculty meetings had evolved into collaborative planning sessions where teachers shared strategies for maintaining student engagement during the challenging period between Thanksgiving and winter break, while also addressing the additional stresses that holiday preparations often created for families who were struggling with financial constraints or complicated family dynamics. The support systems they had established for students who found the holiday season particularly difficult had become models for other schools in their district, demonstrating how educational institutions could address the whole child rather than focusing exclusively on academic achievement. The January return from winter break marked a crucial transition point in the academic year, as the novelty of new classes and fresh starts had to be sustained through the longest and often most demanding period of sustained academic work. Principal Brown and Miss Simian had learned to anticipate the specific challenges that accompanied this mid-year adjustment period, from the difficulty of re-establishing routines after an extended break, to the increased academic pressure that came with preparing for state assessments and semester examinations. Their strategies for managing this transition period had been refined through several years of collaborative experience, and now included carefully planned re-entry activities that help students reconnect with their academic goals, while also addressing the social and emotional adjustments that were necessary after time away from school. The professional development opportunities they provided for faculty during this period focused on maintaining motivation and momentum during the portion of the academic year that was most likely to produce burnout and discouragement among both students and teachers. February and March brought the dual challenges of state testing preparations and the general restlessness that characterized the final months of winter, as everyone in the school community began to anticipate the arrival of spring while still managing the immediate demands of academic progress and institutional accountability. The approach that Principal Brown and Miss Simian had developed for handling these competing pressures reflected their shared commitment to maintaining focus on genuine learning rather than simply achieving satisfactory test scores, while also acknowledging the reality that external assessments played important roles in determining institutional support and community perception. Their test preparation strategies emphasized building students' confidence and reducing anxiety rather than drilling specific content or teaching test-taking tricks that might produce short-term score improvements without contributing to lasting educational benefits. The faculty development sessions they organized during this period helped teachers understand how to integrate assessment preparation into their regular instructional routines without sacrificing the creativity and authentic engagement that made learning meaningful and enjoyable for both students and educators. The arrival of spring brought renewed energy and optimism that infused the entire school community with anticipation for the final quarter of the academic year and the summer break that would provide opportunities for rest, reflection, and preparation for new challenges and opportunities. Principal Brown and Miss Simian had learned to harness this natural surge of motivation while also managing the tendency toward premature relaxation that could interfere with the important work that still needed to be completed before the remessaging academic year concluded. Their April and May programming included capstone projects and culminating activities that allowed students to demonstrate their learning in creative and meaningful ways, while also providing opportunities for reflection on growth and Gumball's achievement throughout the year. The spring festivals and recognition ceremonies they organized had become beloved traditions that celebrated not only academic accomplishment, but also personal growth, community service, and the kinds of character development that was central to their educational mission but often overlooked by conventional assessment measures. The end-of-year rituals that marked the transition from one academic year to the next had evolved into carefully crafted ceremonies that honored both endings and beginnings, acknowledging the sadness that came with saying goodbye to graduating students and departing faculty, while also expressing optimism about the fresh starts and new possibilities that awaited everyone during the summer months and the academic year that would follow. Principal Brown and Miss Simian's final faculty meeting of each academic year had become an opportunity for reflection and celebration that went beyond the typical administrative checklist of summer responsibilities and fall preparation tasks. These gatherings included structured opportunities for faculty members to share their most meaningful moments from the year just concluded, their insights about student growth and learning, and their hopes and goals for continued professional development during the months ahead. The personal growth that both Principal Brown and Miss Simian experienced through their repeated navigation of these annual cycles was evident not only in their increased effectiveness as educational leaders, but also in the deepening satisfaction they found in work that had once felt overwhelming in its complexity and demanding nature. The predictable patterns of challenge and celebration, crisis and resolution that characterized each academic year had become sources of comfort and stability rather than stress and anxiety, as they learned to anticipate and prepare for each phase, while also remaining flexible enough to adapt to the unique circumstances that made every year distinctive, despite its familiar overall structure. Their relationship had become an integral part of the institutional culture they had created together, providing a model of collaborative leadership and mutual support that influenced the interactions among faculty members, the expectations students had for adult relationships, and the standards parents used to evaluate the quality of their children's educational experience. The legacy they were building through their partnership extended beyond their individual contributions to encompass the broader transformation of their school community into a place where learning flourished because relationships were valued and nurtured as essential components of educational excellence. The understanding that their love had become woven into the fabric of their professional mission created both deep satisfaction and ongoing responsibility, as they recognized that their personal happiness and institutional effectiveness were inseparably connected in ways that required constant attention and care. The cycles of renewal and growth that characterized both their relationship and their school year had become sources of hope and energy that sustained them through whatever challenges might arise, while also providing the stability necessary for long-term planning and institutional development. As they looked forward to many more years of shared cycles, repeated patterns, and the endless variety that emerged from the intersection of human complexity and educational mission, both Principal Brown and Miss Simian carried with them the quiet confidence that comes from having discovered work that was also a calling, and partnership that was also a profound source of personal fulfillment and professional growth. The morning routines that had developed between Principal Brown and Miss Simian over their years of partnership carried with them the comfortable familiarity of well-worn habits that had been refined through countless repetitions until they achieved the effortless precision of a carefully choreographed dance. The way she prepared coffee for both of them each morning, remembering without conscious thought his preference for a single teaspoon of sugar and no cream, while he gathered the administrative materials they would need for their daily planning session, reflected the kind of intimate knowledge that emerges only from sustained attention to another person's preferences, needs, and unspoken desires. Their shared office space had evolved organically to accommodate both of their working styles and personal preferences, creating an environment that was simultaneously professional and intimate, formal enough to conduct serious business with parents, district officials, and visiting administrators, while also comfortable enough to serve as a sanctuary where they could retreat during particularly stressful periods to find the emotional support and intellectual companionship that had become essential to their individual well-being and collective effectiveness. The small gestures that punctuated their daily interactions had acquired layers of meaning that would have been invisible to casual observers, but carried profound significance for both participants in their ongoing love story. The way Principal Brown would pause to straighten a stack of papers on Miss Simian's desk when he passed by during his morning rounds of the building was simultaneously a practical assistance and a tender expression of care for her comfort and efficiency. Her habit of leaving small notes in his appointment book, offering encouragement before difficult meetings or gentle reminders about personal obligations he might otherwise forget in the press of professional responsibilities, demonstrated the constant attention she paid to his emotional state and practical needs. The evolution of their communication patterns over their years together had created a private language of glances, gestures, and subtle vocal inflections that allowed them to coordinate their responses to complex situations without need for extended consultation or obvious discussion. During faculty meetings or parent conferences, they could communicate entire strategies and emotional assessments through brief eye contact and slight changes in posture that appeared perfectly natural to outside observers, but conveyed volumes of information between partners who had learned to read each other's thoughts and feelings with remarkable accuracy. This intuitive understanding extended beyond purely professional considerations to encompass their awareness of each other's emotional rhythms, energy levels, and psychological needs during different phases of the academic year and personal stress cycles. Principal Brown had learned to recognize the subtle signs that indicated when Miss Simian was feeling the weight of her accumulated experiences with difficult students or challenging situations, understanding that her apparent stoicism often masked deeper feelings of concern and frustration that required gentle acknowledgement and supportive response rather than immediate problem-solving attempts. Miss Simian, for her part, had developed exquisite sensitivity to the indicators that suggested when Principal Brown's natural optimism was being strained by the persistent challenges of educational leadership bureaucratic obstacles, or the disappointment that inevitably accompanied failed initiatives or unmet goals. Her responses to these periods of professional discouragement had evolved from direct attempts to offer solutions or alternative perspectives to more subtle forms of support that honored his need to process difficulties while also providing the steady presence and unwavering confidence that reminded him of his essential competence and value. The domestic rhythms that characterized their life together outside of school hours reflected the same attention to mutual care and support that defined their professional partnership, creating a seamless integration of personal and professional satisfaction that enhanced both aspects of their shared existence. Their evening conversations over dinner often began with discussions of immediate school concerns, but gradually evolved into broader reflections about their individual goals, shared dreams, and the meaning they found in their work and relationship. The way they had learned to balance their need for individual space and privacy with their desire for companionship and shared activity demonstrated the maturity and wisdom that had developed through their experience of navigating the CK's complexities of maintaining both romantic partnership and professional collaboration. Principal Brown's evening walks through their neighborhood provided him with the solitary reflection time that helped him process the accumulated stresses of administrative leadership, while also giving Miss Simian the quiet moments she needed to grade papers, respond to emails, and engage in the personal reading that kept her connected to broader intellectual and cultural developments beyond the immediate concerns of their school community. Their reunions after these brief separations carried the particular sweetness that comes from choosing to be together rather than simply accepting proximity as a default condition, creating opportunities for genuine appreciation of each other's company and renewed attention to the qualities that had originally attracted them to each other. The stories they shared about their separate activities, the observations they had made during their individual time, and the thoughts and feelings that had emerged during their personal reflection periods provided rich material for the kind of intimate conversation that sustained and deepened their emotional connection. The seasonal variations in their relationship patterns reflected their growing understanding of how external circumstances and institutional demands affected their individual moods, energy levels, and capacity for emotional availability. The increased stress that characterized testing periods and end-of-semester evaluations required different forms of mutual support than the more relaxed atmosphere that prevailed during summer planning periods or holiday breaks, and they had learned to adjust their expectations and modify their routines to accommodate these predictable fluctuations. During particularly challenging periods, their care for each other manifested in small but significant acts of service that demonstrated their commitment to protecting each other's well-being, even when their own resources were stretched to capacity. Miss Simian's practice of taking over certain administrative tasks that normally fell within Principal Brown's purview when she observed that he was approaching the limits of his capacity reflected the kind of protective instinct that characterizes the deepest forms of partnership. His reciprocal attention to her needs during periods when her teaching responsibilities or personal concerns required additional emotional energy created a pattern of mutual support that strengthened their relationship while also maintaining their professional effectiveness. The quiet satisfaction they found in these everyday expressions of love and care had become one of the most treasured aspects of their partnership, providing constant evidence that their relationship was built on genuine concern for each other's happiness and success rather than simply mutual convenience or shared professional interests. The accumulation of these small kindnesses over months and years had created a foundation of trust and security that could withstand the inevitable conflicts, misunderstandings, and external pressures that threatened all intimate relationships. Their ability to find humor and joy in the midst of the serious responsibilities and occasional crises that defined their professional lives had become a source of resilience that protected both their individual mental health and their collective effectiveness as educational leaders. The private jokes that had emerged from shared experiences with particularly challenging situations, the affectionate teasing that helped them maintain perspective during stressful periods, and the spontaneous moments of playfulness that reminded them of the fundamental joy they found in each other's company, all contributed to a relationship dynamic that remained fresh and engaging despite the familiarity that could have led to complacency or routine. Looking toward the future, both Principal Brown and Miss Simian carried with them a sense of anticipation and optimism that was grounded in their experience of successful navigation through multiple cycles of challenge and growth, both individually and as a partnership. The dreams they shared about potential improvements to their school, plans for professional development and career advancement, and hopes for continued personal happiness reflected their confidence that the foundation they had built together could support whatever new adventures or responsibilities might await them. Their discussions about retirement planning, travel aspirations, and the legacy they hoped to leave in their chosen profession demonstrated the kind of long-term thinking that characterized successful partnerships, while their continued excitement about immediate projects and short-term goals indicated that their relationship remained dynamic and forward-looking, rather than focused primarily on preserving past achievements or maintaining comfortable routines. The recognition that they had found in each other not only compatible life partners but also ideal professional collaborators created a sense of gratitude and wonder that continued to surprise them even after years of shared experience. The understanding that their love had enhanced rather than complicated their effectiveness as educators, that their personal happiness had contributed to, rather than detracted from their service to their school community, and that their individual growth had been accelerated rather than constrained by their commitment to each other, represented achievements that exceeded their most optimistic expectations when their relationship had first begun to evolve beyond purely professional boundaries. As they contemplated the ongoing nature of their journey together, both individually and as partners in love and work, Principal Brown and Miss Simian carried with them the quiet confidence that comes from having discovered a form of happiness that was simultaneously deeply personal and genuinely useful to others, a relationship that had made them better people, while also making them more effective servants of the educational mission that had brought them together and continued to provide meaning and purpose for their shared life. And so we conclude this gentle exploration of two hearts that found each other in the most unlikely of places, the controlled chaos of public education, where the demands of administrative responsibility and classroom management might have seemed antithetical to the delicate flowering of romance, yet instead provided the fertile ground from which grew a love story as enduring and beautiful as any tale ever written about the triumph of human connection over the obstacles that might otherwise have kept two souls forever apart. Principal Brown and Miss Simian remind us that love can bloom at any stage of life, that the capacity for deep emotional connection does not diminish with age or experience, but rather deepens and enriches as we accumulate the wisdom that comes from having navigated the complexities of existence long enough to recognize genuine compatibility when we encounter it. Their partnership demonstrates that true love is not the exclusive province of youth, with its passionate intensity and romantic idealization, but can also manifest in the mature appreciation of complementary strengths, shared values, and mutual support that characterizes relationships built on foundations of respect, understanding, and genuine care for each other's well-being and happiness. Their story teaches us that partnership can emerge from the most professional of beginnings, that the formal structures and institutional boundaries that govern workplace relationships need not prevent the development of personal connections that transcend the original context in which they first emerged. The transformation of their collegial collaboration into romantic partnership illustrates how genuine compatibility reveals itself gradually through shared challenges, mutual support during difficult periods, and the slow recognition that two people who work well together professionally may also complement each other in the more intimate dimensions of personal life and emotional fulfillment. The understanding that true compatibility often comes from complementary differences rather than perfect similarity runs like a golden thread through the tapestry of their relationship, demonstrating how two individuals with vastly different life experiences, perspectives, and approaches to common challenges can create a partnership that is stronger and more effective than either could achieve independently. Principal Brown's optimistic vision and innovative enthusiasm, balanced by Miss Simian's realistic wisdom and accumulated experience, created a dynamic that enhanced both their professional effectiveness and their personal satisfaction in ways that neither could have anticipated when their relationship first began to evolve beyond the boundaries of administrative collaboration. Their love story also reminds us of the profound satisfaction that can be found in work that serves others, particularly when that work is undertaken in partnership with someone whose dedication matches our own and whose presence transforms even the most challenging professional demands into opportunities for shared growth and mutual support. The integration of their personal relationship with their professional mission created a seamless blend of public service and private fulfillment that enriched every aspect of their daily experience while also contributing to the well-being and educational success of the students, faculty, and families they served together. The patience and understanding that characterized their approach to navigating the complexities of workplace romance, with its potential conflicts between personal feelings and professional responsibilities, demonstrates the wisdom that comes from prioritizing long-term happiness and effectiveness over short-term convenience or immediate gratification. Their careful attention to maintaining appropriate boundaries while nurturing their growing affection created a model for others who might face similar challenges in balancing personal desires with professional obligations. As you drift towards sleep, let yourself imagine their quiet moments together after the school day ends, when the corridors have emptied of students and the administrative demands have been temporarily set aside, creating space for the intimate conversations and gentle gestures that sustain long-term partnerships through both triumphant periods and challenging times. Picture them sharing coffee in the empty faculty lounge as afternoon sunlight slants through classroom windows, discussing not only the day's victories and defeats but also their dreams for the future, their gratitude for having found each other, and their wonder at the unexpected ways that love can transform even the most routine aspects of daily life into sources of joy and meaning. Envision the morning sun streaming through those same classroom windows where they continue their daily dance of education and affection, beginning each new day with the quiet confidence that comes from knowing they will face whatever challenges arise together, supporting each other's efforts while also finding in their shared mission a source of purpose and satisfaction that extends far beyond personal happiness to encompass genuine service to their community and meaningful contribution to the lives of young people who will carry the benefits of their dedicated teaching into their own adult lives and future relationships. Rest now in the knowledge that somewhere, in the endless cycle of bells and lessons, homework and holidays, parent conferences and faculty meetings, these two dedicated souls continue their journey together, building something beautiful and lasting from the ordinary materials of daily life in a public school. Their love story continues, one school day at a time, in the gentle rhythm of a partnership that has transformed the mundane routines of educational administration into something approaching the magical, proof that even in a world as chaotic and unpredictable as Elmore, love finds a way to take root and flourish in the most unexpected places, creating oases of stability, understanding, and genuine happiness that nourish not only those who share in them directly, but also everyone whose lives they touch, through their example of what becomes possible when two people choose to face life's challenges together with courage, wisdom, and unwavering commitment to each other's growth and happiness.